Joining me now is former CKE Restaurant CEO and Heritage Foundation visiting fellow Andy Puzder. Andy, great to see you. Thank you for being here. We should say, by the way, the market has been on a kind of a pre-election celebration going on for several weeks now, expecting a red wave. But as you heard, that's Rubini there, Nouriel Rubini. He doesn't think it will last. He thinks that even if there's a Republican wave, we're still going to have this massive global recession. Do you agree?
Well, I think there's less of a chance, certainly, if there's a red wave. I mean, the biggest problem he mentioned is inflation, and we can deal with inflation. The Fed is driving demand down. If we can get some policies in place that increase supply will meet demand, as you and I have been discussing for months, and inflation will dissipate. The problem is we've got a president who refuses to address the supply side of the economy, particularly when it comes to energy. And therefore, we're suffering through this period of inflation and perhaps stagflation. Now, this Dr. Doom, as that particular economist is known, has been right once in the past, and he could be right again now. But I think there are policies where we could avoid this, but they're not going to be Joe Biden's policies. They're going to have to be policies Republicans are able to implement without him. Well,
I don't know if you just heard Mark Lauder, but he knows D.C. pretty well. And he said there are enough Democrats, who might go along with some supply-side measures put forth by a Republican Congress so that Joe Biden will face a decision of looking at a piece of paper, looking at whether it's a tax cut or whatever it is to get the supply side working more. And it will have both Republicans and Democrats working for it. And is he going to veto a bill like that if it comes to his desk?
But there really is no knowing what Joe Biden's going to do. I mean, there are serious problems with the president. You know, he gets lost on stage. That's because he can't remember how he got on stage. That's the only reason you get lost up there. And I don't really know who's making the decisions in the White House, so that's kind of scary. But if there's any rationality in the White House, if the person, whoever's making these decisions, has any economic sense or any in touch with reality economically or the American people, he won't veto them. He will try and come to some kind of an arrangement with Republicans where some of these policies can get through. I just don't know if we have a president that is that in touch with what the economy needs. Certainly, given the statements he's made over the past 18 or 19 months, he's not in touch, but we'll have to wait and see.
On the other hand, the economy's in such a state right now. I mean, it was so unnecessary, as we all know, because it was recovering fine during the first month that Joe Biden came in.
Yep.
But it's now in such a place that it really needs the kind of push like we saw when Ronald Reagan came into office, when you need a guy committed to that policy with a Congress that will go along with him. I mean, I just think it's one of those pivotal moments where you're going to need a massive commitment on the part of both the executive and Congress to get things back in order, don't you?
You're absolutely right. And you also have to have the Fed aggressively trying to reduce demand, as happened during the Reagan years. And the Fed is doing that. So all we need now is some positive responses from the president and from Congress that can get supplies up, that can get people back, actually get people back to work where their salaries, are exceeding inflation, not less than inflation, so that we can deal with the economic problems we're facing. The question is, do we have that president? I'm pretty sure we're going to have that Congress as of the beginning of the year. But the question is, do we have a president that's able to do this? I'm skeptical. I don't know if he can, but I'm hopeful.
Andy, you're still plugged into so much of what happens among small businesses that are in the restaurant business and other industries as well. What do they tell you about the next 2 years? What are they expecting?
Well, they're really frustrated right now by the labor force problems they're facing, which is it's hard to find employees. And when you find employees, it's difficult to get them to work as they did prior to the pandemic.
Yes.
We've had a couple of years, particularly with young people, where they've gotten accustomed to living off the government dole, and that really should have ended back in 2021. But President Biden's policies continued the spending and the distribution of cash. So we've got a labor force that isn't very motivated, and people are not optimistic out there. Small businesses are not optimistic. They may be more optimistic after tomorrow. I am hearing good things about their feelings about the Republicans taking over the House for sure, And I think it's for sure they'll take over the Senate, but we'll have to wait and see.
Well,
but I think they are positive about that.
And I want to end on a positive note because I remember the doom and gloom back in the late 70s by a lot of these doom and gloom economists and limits to growth. That was a group, an economic group. They were dead wrong because when you do unhinge, when you take off the chains that are strapping down an overregulated economy, the American economy takes off like gangbusters. Everybody thought Reagan wasn't going to be successful. As soon as those policies kicked in, my God, we were growing at 3%, 4%, 1 year 7%. So that is the great secret to our economy, quickly.
And I'll tell you what, the energy of American entrepreneurs and businessmen and women and workers is unmatched in human history.
Yes.
We've created the greatest prosperity on earth. We can do it again, but we need the right policies, not these ridiculous magic money tree policies, modern monetary theory, whatever else they're pushing this week. We need supply-side policies that'll get the economy back on track.
Realistic optimism. That's what we need. Andy Puzder, good to see you, my friend. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, David.